Hey, folks, John Hendricks here, Second and Saints and Saints News Network. Obviously, big news coming out of New Orleans. Marshon Lattimore has been traded to the Washington Commanders a day after they fired Dennis Allen. So, obviously, it's a big day. NFL trade deadline. Still have until 3 p.m. Central Time in case other moves get made. But this is a big deal. And as far as Marshon Lattimore's future is concerned, I mean, look, the Saints are going to incur some dead money from that, obviously by trading him. But the assets they end up getting back from Washington actually is a pretty good haul for them, So they're going to get back a third rounder, a fourth rounder, and a sixth rounder. It's the original pick that New Orleans sent to Washington to acquire John Ridgeway, the third, the defensive tackle that they made earlier in the season. And so they're sending Lattimore and a fifth round pick, but getting a day 3 pick and then a fourth round. Pretty fair compensation for a cornerback that's, in his late 20s, but Washington is in this mode now where with their record, they're going for it, right? And so for the Saints, this means now that Alontae Taylor is even more important in your building. He's definitely one of your de facto outside corners that should be a starter. Paulson Adebo is lost for the season, so naturally he's going to be a free agent this offseason. We're going to have to pay attention to that, but this sets up the future of potentially being Alontae Taylor and Kool-Aid McKinstry on the outside. And so I don't know that I feel bad about that. And I think with them moving on from Dennis Allen, now it's Joe Woods, but it's going to be calling the defensive plays. You know what I mean? This is something it's a little bit interesting because the way the Saints have played defense historically, a lot of nickel looks. I don't know how much that's going to change with Woods at the helm. And then beyond this year, right? And so Alontae is a guy that has been disruptive. He's been outstanding. I mean, if you go back to training camp, we pointed this out extremely early on that Alontae Taylor was easily one of the most improved players. He's definitely a guy that caught our eye from the get-go. The fact that he came in this building was a guy that was so quick to teach others, get there early, all this other stuff. Like he's completely changed himself, right? And so look, for this one, I mean, goodness gracious, it's amazing how quickly things can change, right? And obviously they needed to move on from Dennis Allen. And then if you rewind, there was a lot of question marks on Marshon Lattimore going into this year, right? Like there was a rift between him and the organization. Now that Allen's gone, you know what I mean? It was really the rift, from my understanding, was that the way the team handled Michael Thomas. That was where most of the frustration came from Marshon Lattimore. Now that's part of it, but at the same time, they mended those fences. It was the right thing to do. Lattimore came in here to training camp. He worked his tail off. Obviously, he had the injuries. He was still around. He was still present. He was still here for this team. But, look, this is New Orleans, I'd say, embracing somewhat of a rebuild type of thing, whatever you want to call it. I don't care what you call it. They've got to do something different to be able to be, strip this thing down, do some things. We've talked previously about Ryan Ramczyk, his retirement, the dead money. They're going to have to navigate through all this stuff. They're going to have to figure out if Derek Carr is going to be their quarterback going forward. This is an important 3 months. And if you haven't seen Ross and I's latest episode on Second and Saints, I'd highly encourage you to go check that out because we spent a good portion of our episode last night or, Monday, depending on when you're tuning in and all this other stuff. But a lot talking about that, right? And so this 3-month span for the Saints is going to be super important. And nobody's expecting this team to get into playoffs, nothing like that. But at this point, you're reevaluating, evaluating everybody. You're trying to figure out what you want to do going forward. And at least you're getting some draft capital. So going into this, the Saints, I mean, they got a first round pick, a second round pick. They could probably end up getting a top 15 pick when it's all said and done, but getting an extra third and a fourth, that's kind of where I look at. Fifth, it's okay, but it brings up who's going to be the one that does all the draft evaluation. Is it still Jeff Ireland? I mean, that remains to be seen, but even with Lattimore leaving, I do like the fact that guys like Rico Payton might get a little bit more of an opportunity. They might have some more corners that come in here and such. And look, Lattimore is super talented. He's going to help Washington out. It's just this is kind of how it goes. You know what I mean? And so he has potential. The coaches know that he has potential. And this is just a situation, I think, where he was clearly your most tradable asset. I think people said Chase Young probably would be one. And of course, there's still time on this, right? We got less than 3 hours to go on the deadline. So a lot can happen. between now and getting here. But with Lattimore, he's always been a guy. I think even beyond last year or this year, it was, last year too. Like he's a guy that's constantly came up as a guy that could be traded, right? And financially, they're going to have to take the hit. You know what I mean? So they're going to take the debt and money, and they'll figure out ways to push it or move it. And of course, the salary cap rises. They'll figure things out. But Marshon Lattimore's time in New Orleans is over. He was a huge part of why this team turned things around. Part of that great 2017 draft class. And it's unfortunate because I remember Lattimore's couple of years, like he got hurt twice in 2 years from friendly fire. Like one, he was playing out of position against the Seahawks and he ended up getting hurt, lost for the year. And then the following year, he gets hurt, rolled up on friendly fire against the Colts. And so it's like, I don't say that is injury prone, but the hamstrings, all this other stuff, like that's obviously been a concern. And look, that was a concern with Lattimore going into this thing. The Chiefs were reportedly in on it, the Ravens and the Chargers, and then the Commanders were one of these teams that, came in late to the table. But, look, it's interesting, I guess you could say, that this is how it's going to go. And I don't know if Mickey Loomis is going to be the guy that does the rebuild. We've yet to speak to him after all this stuff with Dennis Allen. He's scheduled to be on his make his weekly radio call on WWL radio on Tuesday evening. So I imagine we'll get a little bit more insight, but this is a thing to keep an eye out on. I'm going to get some of these questions, comments, see if there's anything in here too, because obviously this is big news for the Saints a day after they fired Dennis Allen, which had to happen. You guys know that. And we were just surprised that it did happen and it needed to happen. And now they can go in a different direction. I really like Darren Rizzi. I think he's going to, I don't say he's going to make drastic changes to make this team be all of a sudden a playoff contender, right? Because there's a lot of issues. There's a lot of things they got to figure out. And again, this is a 3-month window between now and when you end the season against the Buccaneers of what you need to assess. And with a new head coach, it's going to be a new head coach. You don't have to go worry about Hard Knocks now. You obviously will get a little bit earlier start on your off-season program. There's some benefits here. And got the Senior Bowl at the end of January. That's something, obviously, that the Saints are going to have a heavy presence on since it's right there in the backyard of Mobile and then the combine and such. So a lot to digest, but it's a step in, firing DA was a step in the right direction. Trading Lattimore, I know it hurts. It sucks because Lattimore is a great player, one of your elite players that you had on the roster. That stings too, but you got to embrace some type of rebuild, retooling, restructure. Don't care what you call it. They got to do something different. They got to build from the ground up now, I guess, in a way, or strip it down and then start building from the ground. I think they could have some cornerstone pieces. Like I'd look at Alante as being one of those guys, those younger guys that, you can, I don't want to say necessarily say build a team around, but he's one of your young players that I feel like can be something really special for your team. And they obviously did a contract extension for Pete Werner. I don't think the door's closed on Paulson Adebo. He's got that injury, so I don't think his market's going to be super, super crazy. I think the Saints could get him back on like a 1-year flyer, but even still, Kool-Aid could, if they brought back Adebo, Kool-Aid could go in the slot. I mean, there's different ways you could attack this, but you don't know who's definitely going to run your defense next year, right? Like this has been Dennis Allen. And one of the things Ross and I talked about was now it's going to be fascinating because DA's kind of handpicked his defensive assistants as all the coordinators, all this other stuff. And now he's kind of ran the defense the way he's wanted to. Do they get a defensive minded coach? Do they get a different defensive coordinator? Michael Hodges, is he somebody that could be promoted? I mean, there's so many different ways that the Saints could attack this. And there's more than, a few ways to eat the elephant, right? Like, I mean, that's the euphemism here, but, trading Lattimore, big news. It's huge news. I don't know if there's anything else that's going to be as shocking as this one today. I mean, that's probably one of the premier names. I'm sure there's others that might happen or anything like that, but look, get some of these comments and say, Bob says, happy for him. We're just in a rebuild time, and the best way to help that is draft well and get cheaper. I like the compensation that they got. And Big Valley says, giving away a fifth rounder. I don't like sending capital back, I think, but it's part of the necessary part of business. And if that's what tipped this over to make sure you got a fourth and a third, I mean, so be it. You know what I mean? Like, I'd rather have those top 150 picks. And so I understand that for sure. Uh, Lattimore's shoes are tough to fill. I mean, he's arguably was the best corner this team has ever had. You know what I mean? Like, there've been some good ones. I mean, you guys remember Tracy Porter, you remember Jabari Greer. I mean, Jabari was amazing. And unfortunately, that injury that he got against the 49ers that year, like Jabari could have kept playing and he was playing exceptionally well. But, Lattimore was a huge part of the Saints defense. He's a reason why they were able to turn it around where they weren't, you know, as bad as what they used to be. Guys, you remember the bad days. Like, you remember the Saints corners, like, Delvin Breaux was probably one of the better ones, but they tried with Brandon Browner. They had Brian Dixon in there. They had Stanley Jean Baptiste. Like, they had all these guys that came through this building that were just not it, right? And Lattimore is a mainstay. And, look, I think when it's all said and done, I think he's somebody that you deserve to maybe, or he deserves being honored later on. Like, hopefully that's something that can happen. But look, it's crazy. It's a lot of things about trading Carr. Trading Carr, he has a no trade clause. But one of the things is, since you go next year in the offseason, let's kind of talk through that a second, is maybe going to Derek Carr and saying, look, A, what do you want to do? And B, if you want to stay here, we might need to move a lot of your money, right? And if you're going to continue to play, I'm not going to tell you that keeping Carr is the answer. I'm not going to tell you moving on from him is the answer, but I think that it is an option and a discussion that you need to have. Is you need to look towards the future. Does he want to be part of some type of rebuild here in New Orleans, or do they want to just trade him and see what they can get on the market and then just strip it down? Is that Spencer Rattler? Is that another like a bridge quarterback that you bring in? Is that a Jake Haener? I don't know. Like, I think everything should be on the table for this team. And so there's a lot of things that could end up happening. But, look, Marshon Lattimore, I mean, remember the buttception like that. That was one of the best plays. I remember him coming back against the Eagles and making that pick on Gardner Minshew when, they ended up getting that road win in Philly. I mean, there's just tons of these Lattimore plays. I mean, obviously you remember the stuff with Mike Evans and the way he's done against Mike Evans. I mean, that's just Lattimore's a competitor, dude. And, he's just a guy that when he's on the field, he takes away half of the field. People don't throw his way. I mean, he still commands a ton of respect when he's on the field. And Washington gets a major upgrade, gets to go play for Dan Quinn now and a winning organization right now. I mean, what they have in Jaden Daniels be fascinating to see if he plays when they come to the Superdome. And look, it'd be fitting if Lattimore gets a pick on Carr. I mean, I don't have to spell that out. Like, that's a storyline that people are going to be like, oh man, if that happens, that would be something. But man, a lot of comments in here. I'll try to catch up. But Matt asks, is to see anyone getting traded else? The only other people I thought based off of things, free agent wise, that's kind of where I had looked and leaned to. I mean, Chase Young is obviously one. I said, because if you look at it from a perspective of saying, okay, Tano Passignon, he's a guy that's coming back soon. Where do you make room, right? Or, Nephi Sewell, bringing him back. Where do you make room? Do you trade a Willie Gay Jr. because you're bringing him back, right? Like, I'm not saying they, because they like Anthony Orgy a lot. And obviously they have Pete Warner, Demario Davis, DeMarco Jackson's huge on special teams. But beyond that, I mean, they like Jalen Ford as a rookie, but where does his role come in? Is he a guy that's like the low man on the totem pole now, that with Nephi Sewell coming back, do they move on from one of their defensive tackles? Is Colin Saunders, is his days up here? You know what I mean? And not saying that they should trade him, but if I'm looking at everything and looking at tradable assets, potentially Saunders could help a team. Nathan Shepard could help a team. John Ridgway, I mean, you just acquired him, but he could help a team. But, I don't know that they have a ton of players that I would just say they can just deal. Like, that's not necessarily a dig, but I just don't know that they have a lot of firepower here that teams are like, ooh, that's what I want. You're not going to trade Carl Granderson. You're not going to trade Chris Olave. You're not going to trade a Cesar Ruiz or Eric McCoy. I mean, you're not trading Alvin, obviously. I mean, there's just all these things. And a guy like Jamal Williams, I don't know that you're going to get much of anything if you tried to trade somebody like that. So I never say never, because you still got a lot of time left. And this is as of 12:35 Central Time on Tuesday and the trade deadline. So I could be on here and something else happen. So, but yeah, right now it's over for him. And I mean, you got to wish him the best. And It sucks the way it's ended for him, but great player. Just part of business now, and the business has changed. Trading Foskey, I just don't know what kind of return that you get. And again, they need production, they need development out of him. They have to. Peyton Turner's a free agent after this year. Tano's got some void years. Chase Young's a free agent after this year. Cam Jordan, you got to figure out what you're going to do with him. He played 10 snaps. I don't blame him for being pissed off. You know what I mean? Like, you play 10 snaps. Why am I here? You know what I mean? Like, what's the play? What's the plan? I mean, even JJ Watt and, Calais Campbell and some of these guys that were on the tail end of their career still getting playing time and still being effective. And I think Cam can still be effective if you use them in the right situations. But I think a lot of things are going to have to change for this team and the way they've been doing business lately. And now that they've moved on from DA, it is a little bit exciting to see what they're able to do. And is Mickey the guy that keeps doing it? I don't know. I don't know what that suggests. I know people are up in arms about the comment he made regarding DA's exit. And again, I see both sides. Like, what do you want him to say, first of all? But using the injuries as a reason, like, I don't know. Would you use that same excuse for Shon? Like, I just don't know. Like, but that's unfortunate, you know what I mean? But they had to pull the trigger. Like, they couldn't keep doing this. And you got players that are upset, and you got 53 players plus your 16-man roster or practice squad. Like, you got a whole roster of people that are upset with the leader or just not getting the message from your leader, quote unquote. And so they had to make that change. But look, whether it's a rebuild, I'm interested to see how that comes together, right? Like, how many years will it take for them? Because I know the salary cap stuff, and everybody's going to say, they're in salary cap hell, all this other stuff. I understand. And look, the criticism is valid when you're not getting the results. So you can be a critic and say, well, this kicking the can down the road crap is pointless because you're not winning football games. I agree. You're just shifting it. But when you're a bad team and haven't made the postseason in 3 years, what's the point? You know what I mean? If you're winning games and you're going into playoffs and doing the things like they had been doing, nobody cares. But when you're losing and you're putting a losing product on the field, then what's the point, right? So at any rate, so a lot of stuff to be said, and a lot more to happen. I mean, now it's kind of fascinating to follow this team for the back half, if you want to call it that, back half of the year and stuff. But Marshon Lattimore traded to the Commanders. Just wanted to come on here and obviously talk a little bit about that and give some thoughts and such on it. Good compensation, I feel like. Strong compensation. Saints are going to have to deal with some fallout from it. Alontae Taylor is the guy. I think he's the captain of the ship now, if you will. And I look forward to seeing that. I think Alontae's got a lot of great football left in him. And I think, Joe Woods has been instrumental in helping him along the way, and Marcus Robertson too. And so I'm curious to see if they keep that afterwards and what happens there. But look, we'll see. But that's going to pretty much do it for today. For now, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, go to Second and Saints YouTube page. Help me out. Help me and Ross out. We're definitely growing here, but go hit that like, subscribe button and all that fun stuff. And we will talk at you very soon. If something else happens today, well, I'll be right back here. Y'all have a good one, guys. Thanks so much. Appreciate you.